Chapter 387. The so-called going out for a walk was actually taking a walk around the area. After all, there wasn't much to see in this shabby place. The small forest was one of the places he took a walk around. It was the place where Xiaoqing had been ambushed. While walking in the forest, Guan Haishan casually asked Xiaoqing, "Did you encounter anything special on your way here?" "Base Leader Guan, what kind of special things do you think I would encounter?" Xiaoqing smiled and asked in a low voice. Guan Haishan laughed and said, "What I mean is, did you encounter any special mutated animals or something new? Tell me about it. I'm very curious." Xiaoqing nodded and said, "If that's the case, I actually encountered a group of ants right below your feet. They tried to bite an elephant to death, but the elephant felt itchy, so it stomped its feet and stomped the ants to death. Don't you think it's interesting?" Guan Haishan's eyes were cold. He sneered and said, "It's interesting. An ant wants to shake an elephant? It's overestimating itself. The only outcome of overestimating itself is to be crushed to ashes." Xiaoqing also had a smile on her face. "I can laugh at this joke for a year." Yin Qiyu stood to the side, watching Xiaoqing and Guan Haishan exchange back and forth. In that instant, he seemed to sense a special energy fluctuation from Guan Haishan's body that flashed past. He glanced at Xiaoqing. Xiaoqing also felt it. There was definitely something wrong with Guan Haishan. The topic was quickly changed. Guan Haishan took Xiaoqing to see the pond in the forest. There were living fish in it. From time to time, they could see a fish floating to the surface and blowing bubbles. Guan Haishan said, "Originally, I wanted to move the pond and the fish to the base and raise them in front of my house. I would take some good things to raise them every day. If I want to, I can take one out to eat. Later, I found that these fish are fiercer than me." He raised his chin. Immediately, a paranormal came out from behind him and took out a live rabbit from his bag. He tied it with a string and hung it above the pond. The water surface remained calm for about 2 minutes. Suddenly, several palm-sized fishes jumped out of the water. As soon as they jumped out of the water, the fishes suddenly opened their mouths, revealing a mouthful of sawtooth teeth. Then they suddenly bit the rabbit. This bite was really fierce. The rabbit's stomach was torn open. It kept struggling and letting out pitiful cries. However, it was quickly eaten by the school of fish that jumped up. In the end, there was no trace of the rabbit's existence except for the blood on the water and the ripples that gradually calmed down. "Is it fierce?" Guan Haishan rubbed his chin and asked Xiaoqing with a smile. Xiaoqing's face was expressionless. She said indifferently, "Yes. At first, I thought that since it was so similar to me, I couldn't raise it. After all, 2 tigers can't live on the same mountain. Later, I found that they are still useful. For example, they can help me deal with some people I hate and some people I don't like." Guan Haishan's eyes flashed and he smiled very gently. "The only thing that makes me angry is that they always don't listen to me. They are very greedy. I feed them, so not only do they eat, but they also learn to prey on passers-by. Naughty." The anger in Xiaoqing's heart rose again. The more she chatted with Guan Haishan, the more she couldn't suppress the anger in her heart. She really wanted to cut Guan Haishan into pieces and chop him into mincemeat. How could there be such a crazy person in this world? No, Zhu Machan said that Guan Haishan was already dead. Then it was uncertain whether the Guan Haishan in front of her was a human or a ghost. Chapter 388. Guan Haishan seemed to be in a good mood. He said lazily, "I'm telling you this because I want to tell you that it's fortunate that you didn't catch some fish to try when you came. I'm not worried about you. I'm just worried that my babies would be slaughtered." She wanted to shove Guan Haishan into the water and let him feel how much his babies loved him. Xiaoqing, who was about to lose control of her anger, said calmly, "I heard that the scenery around the base is beautiful. I don't think it's a big deal. Are there any other places that are more beautiful? What do you want to see? Why don't you tell me?" Guan Haishan said innocently, "If you don't tell me, how would I know what you want to see?" Xiaoqing wanted to say that she wanted to see him die, but she didn't say it in the end. What she needed to do now was to be patient and wait for Dai to find evidence or something. She looked around and changed the topic. "Why don't we go to the forest behind the base? It's more spacious there. I think there will be a lot of interesting things there. Maybe we can even catch some prey for lunch. Guan Haishan, who had always been sarcastic, was not sarcastic this time. He said seriously, "You're a guest. I should try my best to fulfill your request, but I can't fulfill this request." "Why?" Xiaoqing asked calmly. Guan Haishan said, "The forest was originally a barrier for our base. We could go in to pick mushrooms, wild vegetables, and catch mutated animals to fill our stomachs. I don't know if our actions angered some high-level mutated animals, so one day, there was a beast tied in the forest. They killed all our hunters in the forest. Since then, I've been sending people to guard the forest to prevent others from going in to die." "I see." Xiaoqing nodded. "Then let's go somewhere else to take a look." She said it calmly and casually, as if she really had no interest in the forest. In fact, she had ticked the forest in her heart. Although Guan Haishan acted normal and had a good reason, her intuition told her that there was something unusual in the forest. The more normal Guan Haishan was, the more abnormal he looked compared to his previous behavior. However, Xiaoqing wasn't stupid enough to enter the forest and arouse Guan Haishan's vigilance. The more suspicious she was, the more she wanted to keep a low profile and investigate in secret. After silently memorizing this point, Xiaoqing followed Guan Haishan to walk around. During this time, Guan Haishan repeatedly told her about his hobbies. For example, he liked to tie the legs of his opponents together with iron wires and banish them in the woods. Then he would release some wild beasts that had been hungry for several days and watch those opponents run for their lives. In the end, because of excessive bleeding and lack of physical strength, they would be torn apart alive by the wild beasts. Those things were wonderful entertainment for him. When Guan Haishan talked about them, his face was filled with excitement and joy. Xiaoqing almost lost control of her anger and murderous intent several times. Fortunately, Yan Qiyue was by her side. Whenever she was about to lose control, Yan Qiyue would patiently rub her palm, passing comfort and gentleness through the warmth of her palm. Otherwise, Xiaoqing would have exploded long ago. Even so, when Xiaoqing returned to her room at noon, she was so angry that she almost wanted to tear the house down. Yan Qiyue comforted her while raising her doubts. "I feel that Guan Haishan seems to be deliberately provoking your anger." Chapter 389. Speaking of this, Xiaoqing couldn't help but feel a little puzzled. Why does he want to provoke me? What good would it do him to provoke me? I can't figure it out. Yan Qiyue also frowned and analyzed. Could it be that he wants to provoke you and make you ignore other details? So this base should be hiding a secret. According to what you said, Xiaoqing thought for a while and said, "Could it be that forest?" Both of them thought of that forest and Guan Haishan's completely different attitude when talking about the forest. My intuition tells me that this matter isn't that simple. Xiaoqing thought carefully for a long time and then said, "When Dai comes back, ask him if he found anything. If he didn't find anything else, we have to go into the forest. Even if we know it's a trap, we have to go in." What's that saying again? The most dangerous place is the safest place. It's very likely that they think so too. Xiaoqing paced back and forth. After a while, she said, "I have a feeling that the thing we are looking for is in that forest. Guan Haishan is not stupid, and he knows that we are not stupid. If this is not a trap, then it's best. If this is a trap, then he will use real bait to lure us in. So no matter what, we have to check out that forest." Yan Qiyue nodded. He understood Xiaoqing's mentality very well. This mentality was called invincibility. All conspiracies and tricks were nothing in the face of absolute strength. Therefore, Xiaoqing was not afraid of any traps or conspiracies. However, Yan Qiyue was afraid. He was not afraid of death. In fact, he didn't care about death. Otherwise, he wouldn't be so careless about his own body. But he was afraid of Xiaoqing. Even if it was just an injury, he didn't want it to happen to Xiaoqing. At night, they went out to have dinner with Guan Haishan. This time, Guan Haishan was much more normal. He didn't deliberately provoke Xiaoqing and Yan Qiyue. When she returned, Dai was already back. When he told Xiaoqing what had happened, Xiaoqing almost wanted to rush out and burn down the entire base. It was Yen Qiue and Dai who held onto her thighs and refused to let her go. This time, Dai infiltrated two heavily guarded places. The former was a grain storage, while the latter was also a grain storage. However, the latter's grain storage was only used by Guan Haishan alone. The people locked inside were all young girls and children. According to the caretaker, there were girls being bled every day. The blood that was drained was supplied to Guan Haishan. However, in order not to frequently go out to catch girls and be discovered by others, they would not kill these girls. Every time, they would only release the girls' bodies to the limit, and then slowly nourish them. When they were almost nourished, they would then bleed them. And because Guan Haishan liked virgin blood, those people didn't dare to defile these girls. However, those children were pitiful. It was said that Guan Haishan liked to eat children's hearts. Of course, he wouldn't waste the rest of the children's bodies. He asked the chef to cut them into strips and air dry them. According to Guan Haishan, children's flesh was tender and had a unique fragrance. After air drying, it tasted very good. How can there be such a crazy person in this world? Xiaoqing let out a long breath. Her hands that were grabbing the bedsheet were covered with blue veins. If it weren't for the fact that she wanted to find the experimental base and save more people from suffering, if it weren't for the fact that she wanted to expose the mad demon's true colors and remove this malignant tumor, she really wanted to rush out and kill Guan Haishan and everyone in this base. Chapter 390. If Guan Haishan was a beast, then the people in the base were also murderers who helped the tyrant. Qing, don't be impulsive. Yen Qiue hugged her tightly. Let's wait until we finish exploring the forest. As long as we find the mad demon's experimental base and have evidence, we can completely destroy the mad demon mercenary group. Otherwise, even if you kill Guan Haishan and the people in this base, Lu Haishan and Chen Haishan will appear in the future. More people will suffer. It's not worth it. I know. Xiaoqing took a deep breath and said, as soon as we enter the forest, Guan Haishan will find out that we are not here. So no matter what, we have to contact old Master Qin first. Even if something happens to us, at least the news can be sent back. Dai, this task will be handed to you. Dai immediately shook his head and held Xiaoqing's hand tightly. He couldn't return to the capital alone when Xiaoqing was in the most danger. You haven't shown up, so it's best if you go back. Xiaoqing touched Dai's head. Don't be stubborn, okay? Dai didn't speak. He just held Xiaoqing tightly. After a while, Yen Qiue said, I'll go back. He was very calm. Even if he didn't want to abandon Xiaoqing in such a dangerous situation, someone had to do it. Besides, Dai was more suitable than him to stay. He would get injured, bleed, and lose his combat ability. If something happened, he might become a burden to Xiaoqing. However, Dai wouldn't. Although Dai was slightly weaker, he didn't feel pain, didn't know fatigue, and could recover quickly. In terms of combat ability, he was stronger than Yen Qiue. Yen Qiue knew that now was not the time to consider things based on emotions. In any case, the best person to stay was Dai. Xiaoqing patted him on the shoulder and joked, our safety depends on you. Yen Qiue stepped forward and hugged Xiaoqing tightly. Then, she said in a low voice, if anything happens to you, I will immediately end my life and go over to accompany you. I believe that Dai and the others will also make the same choice. So take care of yourself. Otherwise, it won't be as simple as 2 lives. Xiaoqing's eyes curved into crescents as she smiled and said softly, I know, so we will definitely come back safely. Then, for the first time, Yen Qiue hugged Dai without any reservations and said, I can't stay by Qing's side and face danger with her, so I'll leave the task of protecting Qing to you. I trust you. Yen Qiue knew that in the face of fatal danger, Dai would definitely stand in front of Xiaoqing. Although the two of them were love rivals, the more rivals they were, the more they could understand each other. Although Dai couldn't speak, Yen Qiue knew very well what Dai wanted to say. As long as he was alive, he would not let Xiaoqing get hurt. If anyone wanted to hurt Xiaoqing, they would have to step over his dead body. Why do you make it sound like you're going to be separated forever? Xiaoqing wanted to liven up the atmosphere. We're just going to the forest to investigate. Maybe by the time you come over with your men, we'll already be walking back with Guan Haishan's head. Okay. Yan Qiyu leaned forward and kissed Xiaoqing. I'll leave tonight. Be careful. Xiaoqing prepared some food and necessities for him and packed them. Then she secretly sent Yan Qiyu away. The next day, Guan Haishan came to look for Xiaoqing again. He knocked on the door. After a while, he heard Xiaoqing say, I won't go out today. My baby has chicken pox. Guan Haishan rolled his eyes and then asked, What kind of chicken pox? We have doctors in the base, but we won't let them come over. Chapter 391. He didn't believe it. A high-level paranormal who was fine yesterday suddenly had chickenpox today. Who was she kidding? Xiaoqing came over in her pajamas and opened the door. Then she said regretfully, Although I would like to walk around again, my baby is very uncomfortable, so forget it. There's no need to see a doctor. She'll be fine after lying down for 2 days. Guan Haishan poked his head slightly and saw a person lying on the bed with her back to him. She was curled up into a ball and looked very uncomfortable. He immediately smiled and said, Then I won't disturb you. I'll get someone to bring you lunch. Xiaoqing nodded and mercilessly shut Guan Haishan out of the door. As soon as Guan Haishan left, Erdai got up from the bed and went out of the window first. Xiaoqing casually packed some snacks, then tore open the space and left casually. On the other side, as soon as Guan Haishan left, he ordered his subordinates to carefully observe Xiaoqing's residence. No matter what happened, they were to inform him. However, at this moment, Xiaoqing was already outside the base. She held a dried purple potato in her mouth and waited for a while before she met Erdai. Then, the two of them went in the direction of the forest. Normally, this forest was next to the mountain, and there was such a legend. Usually no one would come here. However, as soon as Xiaoqing and Erdai entered the forest, they found a path that had been trampled by people. In other words, people often walked on this path. Otherwise, it wouldn't have appeared out of nowhere. Didn't a famous writer say that there was no path in this world, but when many people walked on it, it would naturally appear? Follow me. Xiaoqing pulled Erdai and walked forward along the path. She was sure that when Guan Haishan found that they were gone, it would be at least lunchtime. More than 4 hours was enough for her to search the entire forest. Especially for people like her and Erdai, who were extremely fast and were like fish in water in the forest, it was even easier. Xiaoqing took Erdai and jumped directly from one tree to another. This way of traveling was much faster than running on the ground. As she jumped, she observed the traces on the ground. If there were people walking around often, it must be Guan Haishan's group. As long as they reached the end of the path, they might find what they were looking for. After about 2 hours, they entered the depths of the forest. The branches and leaves above their heads were so dense that they blocked the sunlight. And that was the end of the path. There were no more traces in front of them. However, the traces showed that there were only a few trees. There was nothing else at all. Could I have guessed wrongly? Xiaoqing frowned and thought carefully about whether she had missed anything. Did she miss something? But no matter how hard she thought, she couldn't think of anything. She walked back and forth and started to think from another perspective. If she wanted to build a base that she didn't want anyone to know about and wanted to hide it, where would she build it? For this base, the safest place around would be this forest. But there was clearly nothing else in this forest. Could it be? Xiaoqing had a flash of inspiration. Underground? Once she thought about this, she suddenly realized that she had walked into a wrong place. Since Guan Haishan was a smart person, why did he suddenly behave so strangely when talking about the forest? It was as if he was deliberately leading her to think about the forest. The more Xiaoqing thought about it, the more she felt that something was wrong. Finally, she realized that she had really walked into a trap that she had fallen into from the moment she walked through the gate of the base. Chapter 392. The most dangerous place is also the safest place. What a good saying. What a good saying. Guan Haishan was indeed a cunning man. Let's go back. Xiaoqing grabbed Erdai and prepared to go back. If she guessed correctly, Guan Haishan might even know that she and Erdai were going to enter the forest. Just as they turned around and took 2 steps, Xiaoqing suddenly grabbed Dai's collar and rolled backward. A dagger was stuck in the place where she had been standing. Heh, I thought you would think about it for a while before you realized the problem. Guan Haishan squatted on a branch and said with a smile. It's not a loss to call you an old fox. Xiaoqing looked at Guan Haishan coldly. Since you have the guts to appear in front of me like this, it means that you have the confidence to kill me. Of course I do. It's just that I didn't expect you to be a 5th level paranormal already, Guan Haishan said regretfully. It must have been very difficult for you to come this far as a 5th level paranormal. It's just a pity that you can only go this far. Anyone can talk big, but if you don't have the ability to do so, I'm afraid you'll break your front teeth in the end. Xiaoqing said coldly. She seemed to be very confident, but in fact, she wasn't at all. Guan Haishan knew that she was a 5th level paranormal, but he still dared to appear in front of her alone. It fully showed that his strength was not lower than a 5th level paranormal. He was even confident that he could kill a 5th level paranormal. Whether I'm talking big or not, you'll know soon enough. Guan Haishan straightened up, and there was a gentle smile on his delicate face. Since we've known each other for so long and have a good chat, I'll give you a chance. Let's fight one-on-one. If you defeat me, you can even kill me. I won't call my companions over. On the contrary, if I defeat you, both of you will die. All right. Xiaoqing patted Dai's shoulder and gestured for him to stand aside and watch the fight. If Guan Haishan was really strong, then Dai wouldn't be able to help. Actually, Xiaoqing was a little annoyed. She had been through a lot, but she had failed miserably. She had been too complacent recently, and had been too confident in her own strength. That was why she had fallen into a trap today. With her intelligence, she should have been able to tell that there was something wrong with Guan Haishan's words and deduced that it was a trap. She didn't have time to wallow in self-pity. She took a step forward and said indifferently, "Life and death is up to fate. Come. I'll let you make the first move," Guan Haishan said confidently as he leaped and landed in front of Xiaoqing. Xiaoqing wasn't the kind of person who cared too much about face. Since Guan Haishan was so confident and wanted her to make the first move, she would make the first move. Xiaoqing quickly condensed the superpower in her body. A vine whip appeared in her hand, and she whipped it towards Guan Haishan. Guan Haishan reached out and grabbed Xiaoqing. Don't tell me that a 5th level ability user like you can only do this. Xiaoqing frowned slightly. She found that the thorns on the vine couldn't pierce Guan Haishan's skin. With a thought, several vines broke out of the ground and stabbed at Guan Haishan's feet and thighs. Guan Haishan stomped his foot and leaped forward. Then he grabbed 2 vines and tore them apart as if they were noodles. That's interesting. Xiaoqing observed Guan Haishan carefully. She kept releasing vines to harass Guan Haishan, but Guan Haishan didn't use his power. He only used his speed and physical strength to run around the vines. Chapter 393. Xiaoqing suddenly had a guess. She clapped her hands, and dozens of vines drilled out of the ground and surrounded Guan Haishan. Guan Haishan sneered and said, "Petty tricks." As soon as his voice faded, his expression changed. It was too late for him to change his action. Xiaoqing appeared in front of him out of thin air, her hands stabbing into his chest. Guan Haishan subconsciously reached out to block, but his hands and feet were entangled by the vines. He was able to get rid of the vines soon, but that short second was enough for Xiaoqing to put her hands into his chest. The moment her palm entered Guan Haishan's chest, Xiaoqing felt that something was wrong. Under normal circumstances, she would definitely be able to feel the warm texture of his skin wrapping around her palm, as well as the rapid flow of blood. But she didn't. It was as if she had stabbed into a piece of rotten meat. There was no warmth, and even the blood had dried up. Xiaoqing furrowed her brows and tore at both sides with her hands. Then, she tore open Guan Haishan's chest. There was a heart that looked fresh, but it wasn't beating. Under the fresh skin, there were muscles that had lost their vitality. Guan Haishan grabbed Xiaoqing's wrist and said with a smile, "Surprised? Scared? Or surprised?" Xiaoqing broke away from his hand and quickly stepped back. Guan Haishan didn't stop her. He calmly closed his chest and patted it. Then granulation grew out of the wound and quickly mended his chest. Soon, there was only an ugly scar on Guan Haishan's chest. It was impossible to tell that he had been injured. Guan Haishan touched the scar on his chest obsessively, then looked at Xiaoqing and said, "Do you see it? This is God's masterpiece. Only I have such a perfect body. Only I, and I am the closest to God," he said as if he was talking in a dream. How could those stupid humans think that zombies are monsters? That is clearly a more successful evolution of human beings. A more successful evolution than superpowered people. Like me, I can't die. I am immortal. I am the spokesperson of God. You transformed yourself. Xiaoqing didn't know how to describe Guan Haishan anymore. She hated her body, hated the fact that she couldn't taste food, hated the fact that she couldn't feel happiness or pain, and was numb like a corpse. She hated her own rotten insides, and hated the fact that she was a burden to Guan Haishan, causing him to become like this. However, he did not expect that there would be someone who would be happy that he had turned into such a ghostly appearance. Guan Haishan was still smiling. "I think I should let you know the reason before you die. Yes, I died a long time ago. At that time, I was seriously injured and on the verge of death. After the leader asked for my opinion, he asked a few researchers to modify my body. They implanted a special zombie virus in me, causing my body to lose its ability to function. However, my brain retained a certain amount of activity. At that time, they thought the experiment had failed because I didn't wake up. However, I didn't die completely until 2 months ago." Guan Haishan sneered. "The demonic frenzy mercenary group has long noticed you. Do you know why? Those researchers from the south didn't come to join the research institute, but to join us. However, they are all dead. That old man died in your hands, right?" "Yes." Xiaoqing decisively admitted it. She looked Guan Haishan up and down and said after a long while, "Do you think you can defeat me because of your strong recovery ability?" Guan Haishan opened his arms and said arrogantly, "Isn't that enough? You can't kill me, so I can only kill you." Chapter 394. Xiaoqing smiled. She put away her vines and walked towards Guan Haishan step by step. A frog at the bottom of a well. She didn't seem to be walking fast. Step by step, she looked like she was taking a leisurely stroll. However, she soon appeared in front of Guan Haishan. Guan Haishan was also very fast. His black and shiny nails moved as he approached Xiaoqing. As soon as he got close, Xiaoqing grabbed his shoulder and punched Guan Haishan in the face. This time, Guan Haishan was stunned. Xiaoqing didn't seem to be moving fast, but before he could react, her fist had already landed on his face. Xiaoqing was very strong. Guan Haishan's neck made a groaning sound with difficulty. Then with a crack it broke. Then Xiaoqing kicked Guan Haishan's chest hard, sending him flying. If it weren't for a tree blocking him, he might have flown dozens of meters. Guan Haishan fell to the ground like a broken rag doll, his head drooping like a broken rag doll. He reached out his hand, and with a crack he straightened his head. Then he rubbed his chest and got up again. "I told you, these attacks are useless against me." "Is that so?" Xiaoqing suddenly took a step forward and appeared in front of him again. She didn't give him a chance to fight back at all. She beat him up fiercely. In the end, Guan Haishan was beaten up. He looked like a doll that had been sewn and mended many times and then thrown away. Xiaoqing stepped on his head and said coldly, "Even if you have a strong recovery ability, so what? You don't even have a chance to fight back." Guan Haishan reached out and grabbed Xiaoqing's ankle. Suddenly, as though he had no bones, he slipped behind Xiaoqing and hugged Xiaoqing. Then countless bone spurs drilled out from his chest and stabbed toward Xiaoqing. At this time, it was too late to tear space. However, Xiaoqing didn't panic. She allowed the bone spurs to pierce into her body. Then she grabbed Guan Haishan's arms and twisted them like fried dough twists. This time, it was Guan Haishan's turn to be shocked. He didn't care that his arms had become fried dough twists. He quickly retreated and said, "No, no." His bone spurs were produced after his body mutated. After piercing into a human, they could suck their opponent's blood. But just now, after his bone spurs pierced Xiaoqing's body, they didn't suck a single drop of blood. While Guan Haishan was still in shock, Xiaoqing quickly stepped forward and grabbed his left hand. Her nails pierced into his flesh, and then she directly tore his arm off. Guan Haishan stepped back in a panic, not caring about that arm anymore. He dared to challenge Xiaoqing, a 5th-level superpower possessor, because he had an immortal body. He couldn't die anyway. Then he found that Xiaoqing didn't seem to be right either. Xiaoqing loosened her muscles and threw away the arm. Then she said lazily, "Baby, stop him." Apart from Guan Haishan's special body, his strength was just that of a 4th-level superpower possessor. He couldn't withstand a single blow. Dai jumped down from the tree and stabbed her sharp nails into Guan Haishan's skull. Guan Haishan rolled on the ground in a sorry state. He was no longer as complacent as he was before. While dodging, he said reluctantly, "No. Impossible. You are a superpower possessor. How could you?" Xiaoqing looked at him with pity. "Immortal body, huh? You are really short-sighted. I'd rather not have such an immortal body." "You." Guan Haishan dodged Dai's attack and said hurriedly, "Since you are not a living person, then we are the same. We are the same kind. Why don't you stand on my side? Do you want power? Or wealth? Or beauty? I can give you both." Chapter 395. Xiaoqing looked at Guan Haishan coldly. After he finished, she sneered, "Who is the same kind as you? Don't dirty my eyes." Guan Haishan said anxiously while rolling on the ground, "For those ants, you drew your sword against your own kind. What's the point? Once they know you're a zombie, they won't care about what you've done for them. Why bother?" "Say it again. Who is the same kind as you?" Xiaoqing said with disgust. "My father and mother are both human beings. At least I know what I am. At least I won't eat living people without conscience." She wanted to let Dai practice. Maybe he could take the opportunity to break through, but Guan Haishan was too disgusting. She couldn't help but make a move. She fixed Guan Haishan with her vines. Then Dai directly stabbed his fingernails into Guan Haishan's skull. In the next second, Xiaoqing waved her hand. A black space crack tore Guan Haishan into pieces. Guan Haishan didn't resist until he died. He opened his eyes wide and murmured, "I don't want to die." Xiaoqing didn't pity him at all. When he wantonly took the lives of those children, did he ever consider that they didn't want to die either? Dai opened Guan Haishan's skull. It found that Guan Haishan's crystal nuclei were all black. It curled its lips and threw them away. Dirty. After making sure that Guan Haishan was completely dead, Xiaoqing destroyed his body. Then she took Dai back. Since the experimental base wasn't in the forest, then her idea was probably correct. Xiaoqing took out some water and washed Dai's fingers carefully. Then, she took Dai's hand and walked back. On the way back, Xiaoqing ran into the ambush left by Guan Haishan, a group of superpowered people between level 3 and 4. They were all left in the forest forever. She estimated that in a few years, the trees here would grow even more luxuriantly. After all, she had fertilized this tree well today. After dealing with the group of paranormals, Xiaoqing and Dai returned to the base. They didn't alert anyone and quietly appeared in the base, then went to Guan Haishan's place. Guan Haishan's residence was very big. It was like a small manor. There were many flowers and plants in the courtyard. It looked very interesting. Guan Haishan's temper was unpredictable. There was no one in his courtyard. Xiaoqing and Dai walked around and entered Guan Haishan's bedroom. Sure enough, there was a pot of fresh blood on his table. He probably relied on this thing to maintain the vitality of his skin. Other than that, there was nothing suspicious. Xiaoqing thought for a while and decided to check the other rooms. After walking around Guan Haishan's entire residence, Xiaoqing found something wrong. There was a study room where Guan Haishan lived. There were 2 rows of bookshelves in the study room. The bookshelves were filled with books that looked very profound. Xiaoqing randomly picked 2 books. They were all very new. Not to mention reading notes, they didn't even have any traces of being flipped through. Guan Haishan didn't like reading. If he didn't like reading, why would he specially build a study room and put 2 big shelves of books? It couldn't be because he wanted to show off, right? In such a remote base, who would he show off to? So there must be something wrong with this study room. Xiaoqing touched her chin and began to look around. She and Erdai looked around. In the end, Xiaoqing found something behind the bookshelves. She suddenly felt a little embarrassed. She probably watched too many TV dramas. Her mind was full of traps, and she felt that the trap must be behind the bookshelves. Damn retard. Chapter 396. The wall behind the bookshelf looked normal, but if one looked closely, they would find that there were fine lines on the wall. The lines were in the shape of a rectangular door. If an ordinary person came in, they would definitely look for the bookshelf. After all, the bookshelf looked the most problematic, so they would overlook the more obvious wall. In fact, the person who set up this trap was quite smart. Xiaoqing pushed the bookshelf away and began to study the wall carefully. While she was studying, a crack suddenly appeared on the wall, and a door slowly opened. She could hear people chatting inside. Hey, Master Guan should be back soon, right? It shouldn't take long to deal with those two people. B. Is the virgin blood for Master Guan ready? Hurry up and supervise him. If Master Guan doesn't have fresh virgin blood to drink when he comes back, he will definitely lose his temper. Then two people came out. As soon as they came out, they were stunned because two people who shouldn't be here suddenly appeared in front of them. Xiaoqing and Erdai were also stunned. They hadn't found a way to open the door yet, but someone had opened it for them. One of them was about to speak, but Erdai covered his mouth. Xiaoqing didn't dare to let them make a sound. She quickly stepped forward and subdued the other person. Their abilities weren't high, so it was easy for them to subdue them. Xiaoqing covered the other person's mouth and dragged him to a corner. She asked in a low voice, "Is this the Mad Devil Mercenary Group's experimental base?" The person's eyes were filled with fear, but he kept his mouth shut and didn't say anything. Xiaoqing smiled and looked very gentle. "You don't dare to say it? I'll give you two choices. Either you say it now, and I'll give you a quick death. Or you don't say it now, and I'll torture you to death." The person seemed to think of something, but he still kept his mouth shut and shook his head. Xiaoqing did not expect to be able to pry it out so easily. After all, the Mad Devil must be very tight-lipped. Therefore, she signaled for Erdai to bring the other person over. Then, she used a vine instead of a palm to strangle the person's mouth to prevent him from making a sound. "I'm actually quite a gentle person, but that's only limited to humans. When I'm facing animals, I'm not so kind," Xiaoqing said coldly. She used the military knife to open a small wound on the man's neck, the kind that only drops of blood would seep out. Then he stuffed some daughter seeds into it. Under her control, the daughter snuck into the man's skin and sprouted under his skin and above his muscles. Then, small bumps could be seen on his skin. They were very clear. These small bumps grew bigger and bigger, and soon they burst open, revealing the tender green buds underneath. It wasn't just pain. There was also a bone-deep itch, as well as an indescribable fear. After all, anyone who saw grass growing on their body would be dominated by this sense of fear. He was in so much pain that he wanted to scream and go crazy, but he couldn't make a sound. He could only bite the vine in his mouth, and then the thorns on the vine pierced his lips and tongue. He won't die. Xiaoqing looked at the other person and smiled. All the seeds have taken root under his skin and can't extend to his internal organs, so he won't die. Say, if I throw him into a dark corner and let those cute little buds grow in his body, he won't be able to scream or move. He can only lie in that dark corner and feel those little cuties grow happily under his skin until he starves to death, or is sucked dry by those little cuties. Then, when he's discovered, he'll be like a living potted plant. Doesn't that sound interesting? Chapter 397. The remaining person was trembling. If not for Erdai holding him up, he would probably have knelt on the ground. Xiaoqing patted his face and chuckled. "I'll know whether or not it's a laboratory once I go in. Why do I need to ask you?" He looked at his companion, and after a while he rolled his eyes. A foul stench came from his body. Xiaoqing looked down and saw that his legs were gradually stained with water, and then there was a yellow liquid dripping down. He was so scared that he peed himself. Xiaoqing took a step back in disgust and kicked the person on the ground to a corner. Let him fend for himself. The remaining person kept making a pitiful nasal sound. Xiaoqing whispered, "What do you want to say to me?" Dai let go of his mouth and quickly said, "This is indeed the experimental base of the demonic mercenary group. There are many forks in the road, and many of them lead to traps. I'll bring you in." Very good. Xiaoqing liked his understanding of the situation. She immediately asked Dai to take him to a corner and take off his pants. She even used the clean fabric of his pants to wipe a certain unspeakable part of his body. In the end, Dai threw away the dirty pants and threw him a pair of underwear. Then Xiaoqing said, "Lead the way." The captive who was holding a pair of underwear was speechless. Xiaoqing kicked his butt. "Hurry up and lead the way." He obediently put on his underwear and led the way with his hairy legs bare. Before leading the way, Xiaoqing cut his wrist and planted 2 daughters in it. Then she made things very clear. "Lead the way obediently, and I'll give you a quick death. If you play any tricks, I'll make you wish you were dead." The captive originally had some tricks in his mind, but now he was completely obedient. He led the way through the door. After the 3 of them went in, the door behind them slowly closed. There were lights on both sides of the wall. The light was very soft, and the eyes were not closed. The 3 of them began to walk in unhurriedly. After walking for a long time, they reached the first fork in the road. The leader said honestly, "Of these 2 roads, one is the right one leading to the laboratory. The other is a dead end, leading to a trap. Follow me." Then he led Xiaoqing and the others to the left side of the road. Along the way, they encountered a total of 6 forks. There were also many places with traps. If they took the wrong path, they would trigger the traps. When Xiaoqing walked forward, she calculated the direction and distance. When they reached the last intersection and got on the elevator, Xiaoqing suddenly realized that although they were underground, they had already left the base. If her calculations were correct, they should be in that small forest, which was also near the pond. Of course it was underground. Guan Haishan was really astute. On the first day, he led them to the pond. Xiaoqing did not suspect anything else. No wonder it was said that the most dangerous place was the safest place. The ancients really did not lie. When they came out of the elevator, Xiaoqing found that the space was very spacious. There were lights on the ceiling, illuminating the entire underground space as if it was daytime. There were many people wearing white coats and masks walking around. Other than the middle passage, there were rows of rooms on both sides. Some of the rooms had their doors open, while others had their doors closed. Once they came down, Xiaoqing followed the agreement and gave the captive a quick death. Then, she threw the corpse in a corner and sneaked into the laboratory. The way to sneak in was to kill 2 researchers, change into a white coat, put on a mask, and look around from afar. Chapter 398. The more she looked, the angrier Xiaoqing became. Some rooms were filled with test subjects in transparent glass containers filled with strange liquids, and the test subjects were in the liquids. She saw test subjects whose lower bodies had been cut off and replaced with animal tails. She also saw superpowered people who had turned into zombies. There were also babies curled up in their disemboweled stomachs and their mothers. Those test subjects had failed and hadn't been destroyed, or they still had some value, so they were all displayed in the rooms. There were also living people in the rooms. They were all wearing the same uniform like patients, and each of them had a serial number on their chest. Those were the people who were about to become test subjects. Xiaoqing walked into many rooms, and her heart was burning with anger. The most terrible thing was that in one of the rooms, such an experiment was still being carried out. Living people were locked in a sealed room, and then the chemical weapons they had developed were thrown into the room. Xiaoqing saw with her own eyes that several people gradually turned into zombies in the poisonous fog, and finally turned into terrifying monsters that looked like zombies, but also a little bit like animals. However, this kind of chemical poisonous fog didn't seem to have been completely developed, because those who had turned into monsters were all dead. She couldn't suppress her anger anymore, and her long nails were already reaching out. At that moment, a man in a white coat hurried over and grabbed Xiaoqing. "Where did you 2 go? The experiment is at the most critical moment. Why are you running around?" Then Xiaoqing was dragged away, and Dai hurriedly followed. The two of them arrived at a room that was twice as big as the other rooms. There were many white coats in the room, and many things were placed on both sides of the room. There were all kinds of drugs and cold tools. In the middle of the room, there was a table that looked like an operation table, and a woman was tied to the table. The woman's belly was bulging, and it seemed that she had been pregnant for 7 or 8 months. At that moment, several people in white coats were surrounding the woman, as if they were doing a cesarean section. One of them said, "The mother's condition is normal, the transformation is not complete, and the life signs are gradually decreasing." Another person was taking notes in a small notebook. "Next, we'll start injecting SX93. Another person in a white coat who looked like the leader said. Immediately, someone came over with a syringe. The syringe was filled with green liquid, and he shot it all into the pregnant woman's neck. After about a minute or two, the unconscious pregnant woman on the stage suddenly screamed. Blue veins appeared on her face, neck, and body. Her eyes were wide open, and her facial features were somewhat distorted. After screaming for a few seconds, he stopped breathing. The leader hurriedly said, "Quick! Take out test subject number 1398. The rest of the people hurriedly cut open the pregnant woman's stomach. However, as soon as they cut open the pregnant woman's stomach, a small white and tender hand reached out from the pregnant woman's stomach. Quite a few people were a little surprised, but they had seen the world, so they let down their guard. The next second, a wet baby came out. The baby came out with its eyes open, and it looked slightly bigger than a normal baby. More importantly, it had a very strange smile on its face. As soon as it came out, it pounced on the face of a man in a white coat like lightning. Then there was a series of screams, because it gnawed the man's face alive. Soon, several high-level paranormals rushed in and quickly caught the strange baby. However, the man in the white coat had been gnawed beyond recognition, and black liquid kept dripping from his wound. Chapter 399. The leader expressionlessly took out a gun from his arms and ended the life of the man in the white coat. The leader waved his hand and said, "Keep the number 1398 test subject for the time being. This is the only semi-successful test subject we have after the number 068 test subject. Take good care of it. There must be no problems." Xiaoqing's eyes were cold. She quietly took out her mobile phone and took a lot of photos to save them. Then, she left the laboratory and began to look for the power control room. She wanted to destroy this place. This dirty, hell-like place. As for those poor test subjects, she could no longer save them because she found that all the test subjects had been injected with mutated drugs. They were no longer human. Instead of letting them watch in pain as they turned into monsters, it was better to let them disappear with this evil place. However, Xiaoqing was not ready to completely destroy this place, because this was also a piece of evidence. She wanted the whole world to see the disgusting face of the demonic mercenary group. Xiaoqing sneaked into the power control room with Air Dai. She touched Air Dai's head and asked gently, "Are you afraid?" Air Dai shook his head seriously. Xiaoqing smiled and took out a lighter. She calmly found a barrel of oil and poured it all on the surrounding machines. Then she ignited it. After that, she pulled Air Dai and rushed out quickly. She found a corner, and then vines stretched out layer by layer, tightly wrapping her and Air Dai in the middle. Layer by layer, layer by layer. There was no gap between her and Air Dai. The man's body and the woman's body were perfectly attached to each other. When the vines turned into a big ball, a terrible explosion suddenly sounded. At that moment, Xiaoqing felt that she had lost her hearing. Her head was buzzing and blank. Even with the protection of the layers of vines, her chest was still hurt by the shock wave. After a long time, Xiaoqing felt better. This meant that she could hear. Xiaoqing removed the vines, and found that her poor vines had been blown to pieces. At least 1 meter of the 2-meter-thick wall of vines was completely broken. Of course, this did not show how terrible the explosion was. What was more terrible was that she saw the sun. The laboratory was originally underground, but this time, the explosion forcibly blasted through the soil layer above, exposing the entire base to the sunlight. Xiaoqing walked in the laboratory expressionlessly. If she met a man in a white coat who was not dead, she would kill him. If she met a poor test subject who had mutated, she would kill him. After she and Erdai searched, there were no other living people in the laboratory except for them. At this time, the people in the base should have heard the noise and were rushing here. Xiaoqing calmly shot out vines and used them as ropes to pull her and Erdai out. As they crawled out, Xiaoqing said seriously, "Don't leave anyone alive, understand?" Erdai nodded seriously. After they crawled out of the pit, many people appeared in front of them. They were all from the base. Their jaws almost hit the ground. Everyone looked at Xiaoqing with disbelief and fear. Then the massacre came. 2 killing machines that did not feel pain and did not know fatigue rushed into the crowd. They were like 2 lions rushing into a flock of sheep. It was a one-sided massacre. No one could resist at all. At most, they would struggle a few times before they turned into corpses on the ground spurting blood. Xiaoqing took Dummy with her and killed all the way into the base. She hated those crazy beasts in the base. She couldn't wait to cut them all up and feed them to the dogs. Oh, the dogs would definitely not eat them. At first, a group of people surrounded Xiaoqing and Erdai. Later, they were scared out of their wits and were chased by Xiaoqing and Erdai. She took Erdai and killed them all the way. Wherever they went, the ground was soaked with blood. Especially after they entered the base, the square where the battle took place. Blood soaked the soles of their shoes. None of the paranormals in the base could escape. Even if there were 1 or 2 paranormals who ran away, Xiaoqing tore space to chase after them and killed them. Xiaoqing really hated this group of people. She even used the cruelest way to kill them. She dismembered them, crushed them, or swallowed them by the man-eating flowers. Even so, it still could not alleviate her hatred for them. Especially after seeing the soul-stirring scenes in the laboratory. She couldn't bear to let this group of people die. She really wanted to torture them, make them wish they were dead, and make them unable to get up even if they wanted to. After killing all the paranormals in the base, Xiaoqing and Erdai searched several times and found a few people who were hiding. Finally, they found the place where those poor people were locked up. There were only a few girls. As for the children, there were only 2 left. They were lying on the chopping board in the kitchen with their stomachs cut open. For this reason, she specially treated the 2 chefs well. She didn't do anything but cut the meat off their bodies piece by piece and stuffed it into their mouths. In order to give them the best treatment, Xiaoqing specially dipped some soy sauce. Look, she was so kind. As soon as Yan Qiyue returned to the capital, she immediately contacted Old Master Qin. Old Master Qin didn't say anything. He directly mobilized the army and took control of the entire Mad Devil mercenary group. At the same time, he led the strongest paranormals of the Qin family and quickly rushed to the nameless base. They didn't rush there like Xiaoqing and the others. It was as if they were traveling. They could travel for 3 days in a day. They rushed there in a hurry. When the group of people rushed there, they saw Xiaoqing, Erdai, and a few pale and weak girls sitting in front of a big pit. The strong smell of blood was already a little stinky. Chapter 400. The thick smell of blood came from the pit, and the entrance of the base not far away. 2 rows of corpses were neatly stacked at the entrance of the base. Beside them were some broken limbs that couldn't be pieced together to form a complete corpse. The scene looked like hell. The flying flies landed on the corpses, densely packed. Even the ability users who were used to seeing all kinds of cruel scenes since the apocalypse couldn't help but feel a little nauseous. So when they saw Xiaoqing and the others, their gazes were a little strange. Xiaoqing didn't care. She stood up and greeted Old Master Qin, then said, "This is the private laboratory of the demonic mercenary group. Although it was blown up quite badly, most of the evidence is still here." As soon as she said that, those people pricked up their ears. Xiaoqing took the lead and led them to the laboratory that had already been blown open. They looked at the failed test subjects that had not been completely destroyed, as well as the experimental records that Xiaoqing had left behind in advance. Those people who originally looked at her like she was looking at a demon now wished they could rush up and whip those corpses. "You're insane. That's insane." Old Master Qin was so angry that his beard was trembling. He said fiercely, "If the demonic mercenary group doesn't get rid of them, the heavens won't tolerate it." I think the demonic mercenary group must have received the news by now. At the very least, they must have sensed that something is wrong. We must rush back as fast as possible, Xiaoqing said calmly. She was afraid that if they went back late, Wu Buping, that scoundrel, would abscond with his people. At that time, it would be difficult to find him. I'll take everyone back first. The rest of you can walk slowly. Qin Zishi, who had just returned from a mission, volunteered. His wolves and bears were the fastest means of transportation. Old Master Qin nodded. Then, regardless of his old body, he wanted to be the first to go back. However, after thinking about it, Xiaoqing was the first to agree. Firstly, Old Master Qin was the highest boss of the Qin family. It could be said that he had the highest authority in the Qin family. This matter involved a lot of things. Not only did it involve the demonic frenzy mercenary group, but also the people behind the demonic frenzy mercenary group. With Old Master Qin overseeing the Qin family, it would make people feel more at ease. Secondly, being with them was actually much safer than being with that group of metahumans. Xiaoqing was very worried that the demonic mercenary group would counterattack before their deaths and send people to intercept them. Therefore, the first group to go back was Xiaoqing, Dai, Yin Qiue, Qin Zishi, and Old Master Qin. Each of the three brothers of the wolf family carried an Dai, and Xiong also carried an Dai. She didn't need any mounts at all and ran faster than the wolves. He could even go to the front to pick a flower, and then come back to give it to Xiaoqing. It was a kind of Dai romance. The journey was very smooth. They didn't meet anyone intercepting them all the way to the capital. When Xiaoqing and the others returned to the Qin family, they found out that Father Qin was very awesome. Although he didn't trust Xiaoqing very much, he trusted Old Master Qin very much. Therefore, when Old Master Qin brought people to help Xiaoqing, he sent people to monitor the demonic frenzy mercenary group. Just 2 days ago, the demonic frenzy mercenary group suddenly made a move. Father Qin didn't say anything and directly grounded the entire demonic frenzy mercenary group. At that time, Wu Buping found another powerful family in the capital, the Li family, to complain. The Li family was also very powerful, but they were still a little inferior to the Qin family, especially in terms of martial strength. The Li family sent people to question Father Qin, why he imprisoned the demonic frenzy mercenary group. Father Qin didn't even meet them and didn't give a reason. He only said 2 words, wait. No matter how angry the Li family was, they didn't dare to vent their anger on Father Qin because in the capital, who didn't know that the Qin family was like firecrackers? They would explode at the slightest touch. Chapter 401. Moreover, they didn't give face to anyone. Their tempers were explosive, especially Old Master Qin. Not many people dared to glare at him. If the Li family dared to say anything, the Qin family would really dare to barge in and beat them up. Even if the Li family was only slightly weaker than the Qin family, they didn't dare to provoke the Qin family. After all, no one wanted to provoke a bomb that might explode at any time, right? Especially Father Qin, who had a background in strength and wasn't afraid. On the other side, the smile on Wu Buping's face all year long had disappeared. His eyes were gloomy as he paced back and forth. After a while, a young man who looked similar to Guan Haishan walked in. This person was Guan Haishan's younger brother, Guan Hailong. He was also one of Wu Buping's right-hand men. As soon as Guan Hailong walked in, Wu Buping asked anxiously, "What did the Li family say?" Guan Hailong's eyes were also very gloomy. The Li family sent word that the Qin family can't handle this matter. They asked us to wait and not be anxious. F*ck them. Wu Buping was so angry that he kicked the table over. At that time, it was the Li family who asked them to cooperate. The Li family was the one who enjoyed the fruits of their labor. Now that something had happened, the Li family was the first to abandon them. After calming down a little, Wu Buping asked faintly, "Is Haishan back?" Guan Hailong shook his head and said, "No, and we're now locked up. We can't send news out, and news from the outside can't be sent in. No one knows what's going on now." Although they couldn't do anything before, they could still contact the Li family. Now they couldn't even contact the Li family. Wu Buping wasn't worried about Guan Haishan. After all, Guan Haishan had an immortal body. He frowned and said, In the worst-case scenario, our laboratory has been discovered. If that's the case, then we're really finished. As long as our laboratory is exposed, the Lee family will definitely be the first to cut ties with us. In order to clear their names, they'll be the first to think of ways to silence us. If the laboratory wasn't discovered. He paused and sneered. The Qin family wouldn't have locked us up. They were already at the end of the road. Guan Hailong whispered, "Big brother, what should we do?" In a while, pass down the news and prepare to start Plan M. If the Lee family is really so ruthless. A trace of madness flashed in Wu Buping's eyes. Then even if I die, I will drag the entire capital down with me. Guan Hailong lowered his head with some trepidation, but his eyes were filled with madness and determination. I understand, big brother. After Guan Hailong left, Wu Buping picked up a potion and looked at it calmly for a long time. Then he slowly injected it into his body. He had always been a lunatic. On the afternoon of Xiaoqing's return to the capital, the Qin family announced a piece of news regarding the demonic fury mercenary group's 10 major crimes. Ranked at the top was the construction of a living laboratory to research the zombie virus. As soon as this news was announced, the entire capital was in an uproar. Many ordinary people had been bullied by the demonic mercenary group. And there were also many ability users who couldn't stand the demonic mercenary group. However, they never thought that the demonic mercenary group would do such a crazy thing. The evidence was posted one photo after another. Those who had not seen the scene gritted their teeth and wanted to tear the demonic fury mercenary group apart alive. After the anger, there was lingering fear. Fortunately, the demonic fury mercenary group was discovered. Otherwise, what else would they do? Chapter 402. Who knew? They might be the next experimental subjects. Therefore, everyone in the capital supported the Qin family's decision to kill the entire demonic mercenary group. The head of the capital also gave the order to cooperate with the Qin family to carry out the operation. At the same time, the Li family and the major mercenary groups also participated in this operation. Of course, this killing didn't mean killing everyone in the demonic mercenary group. After all, not everyone was bad. There were definitely many low-level people who didn't know what the demonic mercenary group was doing. Therefore, the Qin family's decision was to kill the higher-ups of the demonic mercenary group. They would rather kill the wrong people than let them go. As for the middle and low-level people, they would first capture them, and then slowly investigate. However, when they arrived at the demonic mercenary group's encampment, they saw corpses all over the ground. Moreover, they had mutated and zombified corpses with their stomachs cut open. Then some of the still alive monsters who didn't know whether to call them humans or zombies rushed out of the house. Wu Buping held a tube of medicine and stood in the group of monsters with a faint smile on his face. Let the entire capital be buried with me. He opened the medicine in his hand. The moment the liquid inside came into contact with the air, it quickly evaporated and turned into a light green gas. Some of the ability users standing at the front suddenly felt that something was wrong. As he muttered, he scratched his itchy skin. Then he screamed because he saw that he had scratched off a piece of flesh. He was stunned, but the people around him looked at him in horror. He lowered his head and saw that his fingernails were slowly growing, turning into a familiar grayish-black color. The skin on his hands also instantly spread a greenish-black color that symbolized death. It was very similar to the zombies he had killed countless times. He trembled as he touched his face. With a slight scratch, he scratched off a piece of flesh. The edges of the flesh were already rotten. No. Impossible. How could he become such a monster? The man's eyes were filled with despair. His hand trembled more and more. In the end, he pulled out a dagger and stabbed it into his heart. He would rather die than become a man-eating monster. There was more than one person who was infected. Those who were closer were all infected. The rest of the people retreated in horror from the green fog. They couldn't believe it. How could ability users be infected? If even paranormals were infected, then the fear in everyone's heart was infinitely magnified. Xiaoqing coldly looked at Wu Buping, who was standing in the green fog and laughing arrogantly, and said coldly, "This should be a virus that they have successfully developed. Everyone, step back and don't get infected. Otherwise, even superpowered people will turn into zombies. Some of the infected people stood there in a daze, some knelt on the ground and cried, and some decisively ended their lives in despair. Xiaoqing frowned. She didn't know what to do because the green fog was still spreading. At this rate, it would probably cover the entire capital by tomorrow night. General Qin, in this situation, it's not good to have too many people. Please take everyone to disperse everyone in the capital. Let everyone go out of the city first. We'll move back after we've solved the virus, Xiaoqing said decisively. All right. Father Qin nodded and left with a group of people. Those who stayed were all experts, such as Wu Jiaojiao from Thorns and Roses, Zhu Machen, and Jin Mingyu from Frost. Xiaoqing waved her hand. Gu Chuan stepped forward and tried to condense the water vapor in the air to freeze the green fog. He found that with his strength, he could only freeze a palm-sized area. However, the frozen area was still melting quickly. Chapter 403. Gu Chuan shook his head. His ice power couldn't deal with this strange virus. Wu Buping was slowly walking out. His face was full of malice. Even I can't control this virus. Give up. Even if I die, you'll die with me. Behind him, many babies crawled on the ground. Each of them had a part of their body that was zombified. They were all finished products or semi-finished products from previous experiments. Now they were all released by him. Go, he said fiercely. Then the babies jumped on him. Each of them bit his body angrily. He kept waving his hands, trying to get rid of the babies. He also made frightened sounds. Xiaoqing rolled up her sleeves and looked at him expressionlessly. What was the saying? Cleverness overcomes cleverness? Reap what you sow. Wu Buping had a lot of flesh bitten off, but it would slowly grow back. He had injected himself with the virus. Xiaoqing looked carefully. She felt that the babies couldn't kill Wu Buping in a short time. At this time, a little girl walked out of the green fog. She was wearing a loose hospital gown. She had a pair of big, innocent eyes. She appeared beside Wu Buping and slowly reached out her hand. Even if she stood on her tiptoes, she could only reach Wu Buping's chest. The girl frowned. Then, she put her hand into Wu Buping's body. She grabbed his heart and pulled. Wu Buping was so scared that he bent over. Finally, she twisted Wu Buping's neck happily. She tore off Wu Buping's head and held it in her hand. Then, she danced like she was holding a favorite toy. The babies who had eaten Wu Buping's body surrounded her and lay on the ground obediently. The people who saw this scene couldn't help but shudder, even if they hated Wu Buping. Xiaoqing knew very well that this girl was probably one of Wu Buping's experimental subjects. She was probably the only one who had succeeded in the legend. Wu Buping thought that he could control these experimental subjects, but in the end he was bitten by them. However, what Xiaoqing and the others were most worried about was not the experimentals, but the drifting mist. It was constantly spreading like an infectious disease, dyeing the nearby mist green. The little girl opened her mouth and looked at Xiaoqing and the others with a gaze full of malice. She was like a hungry tiger that had been released from a cage, looking at everything with malice and greed. Xiaoqing took a deep breath and said calmly, "Although our biggest worry is this fog, the most important thing is to deal with these zombies. If they escape, the consequences will be unimaginable." But Wu Jiaojiao frowned. "There's no way for us to enter the fog. Maybe I can give it a try." Xiaoqing's confidence naturally came from her body. She was not a human being. Even if she turned into a zombie, to what extent could she turn into a zombie? She stretched out a vine and then slowly probed into the fog. On the surface, only one vine was probing into the fog, but Xiaoqing was secretly manipulating the vine to absorb the fog into her body along with the vine. To her surprise, the fog not only didn't cause any harm to her, but also turned into a special kind of energy the moment it entered her body. This special kind of energy changed her body, while strengthening her superpower. In just a short while, Xiaoqing felt that she was about to break through a small level. Chapter 404. I'm a wood-powered paranormal. I have a plant that looks like a jellyfish. When it's released, it wraps me in the middle and isolates me from all the poisonous gas. Xiaoqing spouted nonsense with a straight face. I want to try and see if I can isolate this kind of fog as well. Be careful. Gu Panpan, who knew Xiaoqing well, said seriously. Xiaoqing deliberately stretched out her hand in front of everyone. She put her hand into the fog. After a long time, nothing happened. Everyone heaved a sigh of relief, looking at Xiaoqing's gaze as if they were looking at their savior. Xiaoqing continued to talk nonsense seriously. With my current strength, I can only protect one person like me from this kind of fog. So, except for me and Dai, you all go out. Judging by the speed of the fog, the whole yard will be covered soon. You all wait for us outside. They looked at each other, nodded, and went out. Xiaoqing, who had fooled everyone, went into the fog with Dai. When she went in, she told Dai to see if he could absorb the fog to strengthen himself. Then the two of them went in happily. The girl didn't expect that Xiaoqing could come in. She was planning to eat that person first. Xiaoqing and Dai came in. The girl let out a shrill roar, and the babies were the first to pounce on her. Actually, they were all innocent. Before they were born, their chance to live had been taken away by someone else, and they had been transformed into such monsters. But Xiaoqing had no choice but to kill them, because if she didn't kill them, more people would die in their hands in the future. Don't forget, these baby-like zombies can't control their desires, they can eat people. So Xiaoqing and Dai didn't show any mercy when they attacked. These baby zombies were not weak. The weakest one was at the peak of level 3, and the strongest one was at level 4. However, they were useless in front of Xiaoqing. Soon, Xiaoqing and Dai killed more than half of them. The little girl zombie saw that the situation was not good, so she rushed over immediately. She was probably a paranormal when she was alive, and her power was strange. She could mist her body quickly. When she turned into a cloud of mist, her speed would become very fast. Then, she would condense into a solid body and appear in front of Xiaoqing. When she was fatally injured, she would turn into a cloud of mist again. In this way, Xiaoqing couldn't hurt her at all. Xiaoqing and the little girl zombie fought for a long time. When all the baby zombies were killed, they still couldn't defeat the little girl zombie. She wasn't as strong as Xiaoqing, but her power was too strange. Zombies had a strong recovery ability, so Xiaoqing couldn't do anything to her in a short time. Seeing that the fog had already spread out, Xiaoqing was a little anxious. She suddenly attacked, temporarily freezing the space around the little girl, and then attacked the little girl. She almost destroyed half of the little girl's body. The little girl became crazy. She suddenly turned into a cloud of red mist and rushed to Xiaoqing. The whole cloud of red mist had a sense of madness. Dai seemed to have found something. She quickly threw herself at Xiaoqing. Then, with a loud sound, the cloud of red mist exploded when it touched Dai. The power of the explosion was very strong. The little girl, who only had a small half of her body left, took the opportunity to run away. When the power of the explosion calmed down a little, Xiaoqing immediately stood up and held Dai in her arms. She eagerly checked Dai's body. Dai's back had no flesh at the moment. She could even see his spine and the internal organs inside. What was more terrible was that Dai didn't recover. If it was in the past, his wounds would definitely heal slowly. But this time, Xiaoqing checked for a long time, but the wounds didn't heal by themselves. Xiaoqing was so distressed. She didn't have time to absorb the mist. She found a piece of clothing from the space and wrapped it around Dai. Then, she ran out with Dai in her arms. She was so fast that the people waiting outside only felt a gust of wind in front of their eyes. Then she disappeared. Xiaoqing only left a sentence: one escaped. In fact, it was killed. Everyone was speechless. Chapter 405. Xiaoqing didn't have time to say more. She hugged the Dai and ran back to her house. There was an indescribable fear in her heart. In the past, even if she or the Dai were injured, Xiaoqing didn't have this kind of feeling. Because they were zombies, unless it was a fatal injury like cutting off their heads, normal injuries would heal very quickly. But this time, the Dai didn't show any signs of healing. Xiaoqing was very scared. She was so scared that her heart was flustered. She was so scared that her legs went soft. She was so scared that her heart was in a mess. When she rushed home, Fu Jingma was watering the flowers. When he saw Xiaoqing rushing in with the air dye, he was shocked. "Sister Qing, what's wrong?" "Nothing. Watch the door." Xiaoqing hugged the air dye and rushed upstairs expressionlessly. Probably because he was more relaxed after entering his own house, Fu Jingma accidentally saw the air dye's back that wasn't covered by clothes. It was a shocking sight. Fu Jingma was stunned. He stood there in a daze for a long time before he chuckled. There was an indescribable madness in his eyes. He was wondering how Fu Jingshan could be safe and sound, and had only lost his memory. It turned out that Fu Jingshan was no longer human. He held the kettle in his hand. His eyes were filled with uncontrollable jealousy. Fu Jingshan, oh Fu Jingshan. When he was alive, he took everything from him. Now that he was dead, he still wanted to fight with him. He couldn't accept it. Why did all the good things belong to Fu Jingshan? Why did everyone like Fu Jingshan? Why did Fu Jingshan not have to do anything to get the things that he couldn't get no matter how much effort he put in? Why? He and Fu Jingshan had the same face, but Xiaoqing would rather like a zombie than look at him. Fu Jingma's eyes gradually turned from crazy jealousy to cold and bloodthirsty. A zombie. He wasn't even a human. What did he have to fight with him? Fu Jingshan, you should have died long ago. So this time, you should die quietly. Whatever you have, I will take over for you. Xiaoqing carried air dye to the second floor, and carefully put him on the bed. She removed his coat, but the shocking wound still showed no signs of recovery. Xiaoqing observed carefully, and discovered that his wounds were actually recovering. However, there was a special power that was destroying his wounds at the same time as they were recovering. Every time the wound healed a little, it would immediately be destroyed, so it looked like it hadn't healed at all. She was extremely anxious. When she turned around, she realized that Yan Qiyue and the others were not back yet. She rushed out like a gust of wind and carried Yan Qiyue back. "Quick, take a look. What's wrong with him?" Yan Qiyue was carried so hard that he couldn't breathe. He wanted to joke with Xiaoqing with a bitter smile, but he saw the huge wound on Air Dai's back. He didn't like Air Dai very much. He was jealous that Air Dai had Xiaoqing's heart. Sometimes he would secretly complain about him. However, he never thought of letting Air Dai die because Xiaoqing would be sad. Moreover, Air Dai loved Xiaoqing very much. He was willing to protect Xiaoqing with his life. Yan Qiyue could see that. Therefore, even if he was crazy with jealousy, Yan Qiyue didn't do anything to Air Dai. On the contrary, when he saw Air Dai's serious injury, his first reaction was to think about how to help Air Dai. After Xiaoqing told Yan Qiyue about her discovery, Yan Qiyue gritted his teeth and said, "I need some time to do research because I'm not sure what the power in his wounds is." Xiaoqing nodded and said, "Just do your research. Air Dai should be able to hold on for a while." Chapter 406. Yan Qiyue nodded and began to move her tools. Xiaoqing was very anxious. She suddenly felt like smoking, so she walked out of the door and lit a cigarette. It was as if this could ease her anxiety. Yan Hanqing and the others came back one after another. Seeing Xiaoqing like this, they knew that something must have happened. Gu Panpan was the representative and asked Xiaoqing, "How is it?" "The injury is very serious, and there is no way to recover. Qiyue is thinking of a way." Xiaoqing took a puff and put out the cigarette. She asked in a low voice, "How is the fog?" "It is still spreading. Old Master Qin has already sent people to evacuate the residents in the city. Currently, everyone is moving out of the city. The Prime Minister sent researchers to take some of the fog back for research. We don't know the results yet," Yan Hanqing said in a low voice. "Let's go back and rest first. The fog won't spread for a while." Xiaoqing forced a smile and said, "Hanqing, wait for a while." The others looked at each other and left. Only Yan Hanqing was left. Xiaoqing put out the cigarette, but the remaining half was still between her fingers. She twirled the cigarette and said, "I have a bad feeling. Hanqing, if something happens in the future and I am not by your side, go directly to Jiang City. I believe that there are more zombies. Although they are no longer human, they are more trustworthy than humans." "It won't happen." Yan Hanqing grabbed Xiaoqing's hand. After holding it, He felt that he was too impulsive. However, he couldn't bear to let go of that warm and soft hand. Listen to me. I'm not saying that something bad will definitely happen in the future, but it's better to be safe than sorry. After all, this is a very good escape route. Yinyi is a good person, she said in a low voice. People should always think more. Yan Hanqing silently agreed. Xiaoqing continued. In this post-apocalyptic world, no one can say for sure how long they can live. I'm always worried that if one day something really happens, my son will be entrusted to you. Yan Hanqing suppressed the bitterness in his heart and whispered, nothing will happen. In order to reassure Xiaoqing, he added, I will protect the baby. Then I'm relieved. You should also go and rest, Xiaoqing said. Yan Hanqing reluctantly let go of his hand and slowly left. After he left, Xiaoqing leaned against the windowsill and closed her eyes. She was exhausted. From the apocalypse until now, she had to shoulder the safety of everyone around her. Sometimes, she was so tired that she wanted to cry, but when she saw the gentle and happy eyes of the people around her, she would have the strength to grit her teeth and continue to bear it. Since a long time ago, her instructor had said that she was a person who liked to carry everything on her own. Living like this would be very difficult and tiring. If possible, Xiaoqing also hoped that there would be someone who could share the burden with her. However, most of the time, she would not think too much. She would only grit her teeth and walk forward, opening a path for Dai and the others. At this time, she understood Yan Chiyue's masochistic tendencies. When she was very tired and bitter, her temper would become very bad. However, she would not vent her anger on the people around her. If she held it in for too long, she would become a pervert. No wonder Yan Chiyue always said that the two of them were a match made in heaven. Thinking about it this way, it was indeed true. Xiaoqing thought about a lot of things. In the end, she decided to go out for a walk. She went to the place where the fog was spreading and tried to absorb the fog. This kind of fog could indeed be absorbed, and was very beneficial to her. However, her absorption speed was not as fast as the speed of the fog spreading. Secondly, she could not expose this fact. After absorbing for a while, Xiaoqing had a flash of inspiration, and summoned out her family's Mengmeng's little vine. Just as she expected, once the vine plunged into the fog, it began to absorb the fog. Several vines were like several transportation pipes, unceasingly transporting the fog into her body, and the speed was indeed much faster. Chapter 407. After absorbing for a while, she stopped. She couldn't absorb it secretly like this. She had to find an opportunity to let everyone know that she had a way to deal with the fog. Then she would deal with it openly. Otherwise, it would be very disadvantageous for her if she was discovered. After looking at the fog, Xiaoqing went out of the city again. Along the way, she saw many people moving out. They were moving all their valuables and belongings out. Many tents had been set up in the open space outside the capital. Those people were temporarily living in these tents. If the fog could be dealt with before it spread out of the city, they could move back directly. If the fog couldn't be dealt with before it spread out of the city, they would have to move further away. Everyone looked worried. After all, they had settled down and no one wanted to be homeless again. Moreover, according to the researchers, if there was no way to suppress the fog, it could even spread to the whole world. As long as there was enough time, this possibility was very high. The first to be completely submerged would definitely be China. This was because the fog contained a kind of devouring virus. It could assimilate the air, and then spread out continuously. Father Qin was leading people to settle down the ordinary people who had just left the city. Qin Zishi was also leading a small team of guards to patrol around. Then Xiaoqing met the number 1 chief for the first time. The chief looked to be in his 40s. His eyebrows were very gentle, and had a scholarly air. However, Xiaoqing knew that no one who could sit in this position was simple. Especially after Doomsday, they could still hold their position. He seemed to want to get to know Xiaoqing. Xiaoqing was worried about Dai, so she went back after chatting for a while. The next day, Old Master Qin sent a message. The group of old fellows in the research institute had studied it all night. The final conclusion was that it couldn't be suppressed. This was because they couldn't find anything that could restrain the fog. No wonder Wu Booping said before he died that he wanted the whole world to be buried with him. Presumably, there was no antidote for this virus since it was developed. That was why Wu Booping didn't dare to use it until he was about to die. Yin Chiyue hadn't come out yet. He only had a bowl of porridge halfway through. When he came out, his eyes were dark. As he ate the porridge, he was calculating something. After finishing the porridge at the door, he plunged into the room again. Xiaoqing couldn't help at all. She felt more and more annoyed. At this time, she realized that her relationship with Air Dai was not as simple as family. She liked Air Dai and Yin Chiyue. Once she admitted it, Xiaoqing felt inexplicably relieved. In fact, she had always known it, but she just didn't dare to admit it. Xiaoqing really wanted to laugh at herself for being so timid. Then she felt at a loss. What about the future? She knew Yin Chiyue's character. As long as she wanted him to do something, even if she wanted him to die immediately, he would do it immediately. If she said that she was willing to accept Yin Chiyue, even if it was just bringing an Air Dai with her, Yin Chiyue would go crazy with joy. She always knew this. But what about Air Dai? He had no memory and didn't know anything. He just loved her instinctively. What would happen after he regained his memory? Xiaoqing thought about it for a long time, and decided to put this matter aside for the time being. When Air Dai regained his memory, she would ask Air Dai if he was willing to live with her and Yin Chiyue. If Air Dai wasn't willing, she would let go even if she couldn't bear to. If Air Dai was willing, then he shouldn't blame her for being selfish for keeping both men. Chapter 408. As for what the world would think of her, was that important? She was living for herself and for the people she cared about. After thinking through this, Xiaoqing felt much more relaxed. She had taken her revenge. All that was left was Fu Jinling, who didn't know what was good for her. If she met her in the future, she could just kill her. Everyone in her family had the ability to protect themselves. Even if something happened to her one day, they would still be able to live well. She didn't need to worry about this anymore. She also thought through the matter between Air Dai and Yin Chiyue. She felt that her life was almost complete. After dragging it on for another day, Xiaoqing felt that she couldn't drag it on any longer. Then she went to look for the bureau chief and went straight to the point. I have a way to suppress the fog. As for whether I can get rid of the fog, I'm not sure. The bureau chief asked very seriously. Will it harm you? Xiaoqing shook her head and continued to make up nonsense. I'm not sure either. But I have a kind of ability that was given to me by my plants. That is purification. I can absorb the fog into my plants, and then slowly purify it. Although the speed is a little slow, it's still faster than the speed at which the fog spreads. The bureau chief grabbed Xiaoqing's hand and said, I thank you on behalf of the entire country. If you find that it's harmful to your body, please stop. We will think of another way. Xiaoqing nodded and brought her small vines to absorb the fog. At the start, the bureau chief, Old Master Qin, and the rest were looking at her worriedly from not far away. Xiaoqing had to appear to be strenuous, serious, and cautious. She had to absorb the fog slowly and maintain a speed that was slightly faster than the speed at which the fog spread. When the fog had spread a little more, the bureau chief and the rest had all retreated. Only then did Xiaoqing speed up. Dozens of vines flew out and absorbed a pile of fog into her body in a matter of minutes, then converted it into her energy. Middle stage 5th level, late stage 5th level, peak stage 5th level. Very quickly, Xiaoqing felt that she was only one step away from 6th level. Before she broke through, absorbing the mist would be useless. Xiaoqing stored all the mist in her vines and body, waiting to absorb it after she broke through. After the mist accumulated, it formed small green beads that existed in the vines and her body. Xiaoqing worked day and night, and Yin Chiyue also researched day and night. In the end, they came to a conclusion that the reason why Air Dai couldn't recover was that there was a special kind of energy in his wound. This kind of energy was very destructive, and it kept destroying the newly healed wound. There were two ways to restore the Air Dai. The first was to find something that could restrain this energy and remove it. The second was to let the Air Dai break through. If Air Dai could break through to level 5, then his body would undergo a rebirth. When his recovery ability greatly exceeded the destructive power of this energy, as long as Xiaoqing suppressed this energy, Air Dai would be able to recover. As for the thing that could restrain this energy, Yan Qiyu hadn't found it yet. However, Yan Qiyu temporarily maintained Air Dai's current condition so that his wound wouldn't worsen. This allowed Xiaoqing to be at ease and continue absorbing the mist. The mist became less and less, and everyone was cheering. They looked at Xiaoqing as if they were looking at a hero. Xiaoqing didn't care about this. She didn't need to be everyone's hero. She just wanted to be Air Dai and the rest's protective umbrella. That was enough. After the last piece of mist was gradually absorbed by her, Xiaoqing burped in satisfaction. She felt that her body and mind were full. She moved her body, and her eyebrows relaxed. As long as she was given an opportunity, she could immediately break through to level 5. The bureau chief walked over with his men, and his eyebrows were filled with joy. Captain Xiao, you've done a great job this time. You've saved the entire capital city. Xiaoqing waved her hand. It's just a small matter. If you keep saying this, I really can't take it anymore. No matter what, your contribution this time can't be denied. I have to thank you on behalf of everyone. The bureau chief thanked her while thinking about what reward to give Xiaoqing. At this moment, Gu Panpan ran over with Yan Qiyu on her back. Sister Qing, Air Dai is missing. Yan Qiyu, who was on her back, was also injured. Her face was pale as she curled up on Gu Panpan's back. When Xiaoqing heard Gu Panpan's words, her head buzzed. Chapter 409. First is my daughter's novel. She has millions of credits and is guaranteed to be a scammer. The national supporting female ghost catcher. Leisurely summary. She is an unknown extra in the entertainment industry. She goes to the set every day just to get food. She is the last heir of the Yin-Yang family. She failed to guide the soul and died. After her rebirth, she became the daughter of the Jiang group. She has a father who is obsessed with his daughter and 3 brothers who are obsessed with her sister. During the day, she would still be an extra in the set. At night, she would have sex with a ghost. Oh no! She would lead the ghost to the right path. She accidentally became famous as the evil female supporting lead. Advertisements and scripts came one after another. She accidentally formed fan clubs all over the country. People all over the country followed her. She was known as the national supporting female, and received so many awards. She accidentally caused the film emperors and actresses to quarrel because of her. The film emperors and actresses were willing to play supporting roles for her. The directors fought to tailor a script for her. Her path to stardom was bright, but she still did not film at night. She only took on supporting roles. Her opponents slandered her, and said she was acting like a big shot. Her fans collectively asked her to be the lead. The paparazzi chased her all over the city just for an answer. She just smiled. But, looking at the king of hell behind her, who was supposed to be cold and abstinent, she was confused. She just came out at night to catch a ghost. Why did he have an angry expression on his face that said, "How dare you cheat on me?" Then there is my heir Tun. She just finished a long novel. Needless to say, she is also very cute and easy to tease. The transmigration country Queen Shang. Refreshing heir Tun summary. Unfortunately, she just took a nap on the plane. When she opened her eyes again, she returned to the time before liberation. She went from being the female CEO of a multinational corporation with a net worth of billions, to a down-and-out farmer's girl with old and young children. God, this joke is too big. Even if you want to lower your status, you can't lower it like this. Damn, was it easy for her to be a female CEO? Mu Jinsi, who was used to countless storms, expressed that she could not accept such a huge change. Even if she was down and out like an ancient farmer's girl, she had to be the master and create a new kingdom of her own. First of all, she brainwashed her honest parents who were often bullied. She made them understand the truth of kind people being bullied, and kind horses being ridden. Next was to teach the pedantic big brother bookworm, so that he would never return on the path of being a black-bellied person. Next was, did she really give birth to this little bun? Looking at the skinny and tanned bun hugging her thigh tightly, Mu Jinsi was momentarily confused. Forget it, it's just raising a bun. I guarantee that he'll be fat and white. Mu Jinsi went all out to accumulate wealth. She quickly became the richest person in the village, the richest person in the town, the richest person in the city, and the richest person in the country. Just when she felt that she had achieved her goal, wave after wave of relatives suddenly appeared. Even Steamed Bun's father appeared. Mini theater, Mu Jinsi. Just because you say it's yours, it's yours. Do you have any proof? If you're so capable, do a paternity test. Steamed Bun's father. It looks so much like me. If it's not mine, whose is it? Mu Jinsi replied. The world is full of wonders. It's not strange for people to look alike. Steamed Bun's father. In that case, I have a better way to prove it. What? He sounded suspicious. Let's have another one and compare them, then we'll know. F***ck off. Finally, it was Meng Meng Ching Ching, Huang Ruomeng, Wen Yun Yun Yun. You can tease her as you wish. The seductive wife of marriage stopped fooling around by Wen Yun Shui Qing introduction. Beautiful, sexy, and seductive. She is a third-rate supporting actress in front of the big screen. In the TV series, she is known as the mistress, lover, and bad woman. She is a vixen in the eyes of the audience. He is the CEO of the Imperial Entertainment Group, the youngest billionaire on the Forbes list. He is cold, noble, and powerful. He controls the economic lifeline of the city of Brisk. He is cold and emotionless, but he loves her to the bone. One day, bodyguard. Sir, the young madam said that you are old meat and she likes fresh meat. She wants to divorce you. Man, she dares? That night. I heard that you want to divorce me? Yes. You really want to divorce me? Yes. He walked forward slowly, and his gaze swept past the magazine on the side. His devilishly charming face was filled with suppressed anger, and his cold fingers gently pinched her chin. Because of this man? Yes. Woman, are you challenging my bottom line? She raised her eyes and was fearless. Yes. Veins popped out of his skin. His thin lips curled up and he tore off her dress. I will make you make sounds other than yes. Purple marks appeared all over her body. She was taken aback. The divorce was unsuccessful. She ran away from home. Bodyguard. Sir, something bad has happened. The young madam. The young madam is missing. Man, how dare she? Many years later, she returned as the queen of movies. As soon as she got off the plane, she was forced into a corner. Where do you think you're going with my seed? To get married? Can't I? Woman, don't forget. You are my wife. Unless you want to commit bigamy. The man leaned against the wall with one hand and squinted his dark eyes dangerously. Within a few days, a marriage advertisement had spread to every corner of the city of Brisk. Mother of Stars, the Yu family, was looking for a husband for all the single men in the city with a dowry of 100 million. The man stood up abruptly and his face turned green. Shenhuan Huan, how dare you? He wanted to see who dared to marry his woman. Cohabitation. Hey, are you asleep? The woman patted his shoulder. The man looked up but didn't make a sound. Are you really asleep? The woman didn't give up and continued to harass him. There was still no response. The woman poked him again. The man finally lost control and pressed the woman under him. If you're not sleepy, then don't sleep. Ugh. Her words of resistance turned into soft moans. Oh, that's not it. She just wanted him to go over the script with her. Cutie bow. At the dinner table, a certain baby pouted and complained. Mom's cooking sucks. That's true. Little Flying Sky doesn't even eat your mom's cooking. A certain dad couldn't help but complain. Little Flying Sky was their family dog. Sucks. Then why did you finish it all? A certain mom was angry. Dad's cooking is worse than a dog's, a certain baby said. Finally, she brought up a new story for the baby. Rumored best actor spoils his husband to the bone. Chapter 410. Dai was still taking care of her wound. Why did she suddenly disappear? Xiaoqing's face was as pale as a ghost. She grabbed Gu Panpan and asked anxiously, what happened? Yin Qiue tried to hold on and said, I was in my room, researching the antidote. Suddenly, a group of people barged in and snatched Dai away. Xiaoqing closed her eyes and forced herself to calm down. After a while she said, Pan, bring Qiyu and my son. Don't bother about Fujingma. Leave capital city first. Gu Pan was about to speak when she saw Xiaoqing suddenly open her eyes. Her eyes were cold. You will only be a burden if you stay. Bring Qiyu and the baby away. That will be the greatest help to me. Yan Hanqing stepped forward and said, Pan, bring them away. I will stay. Enough. You leave too. Xiaoqing said indifferently. Don't forget what you promised me. Yan Hanqing's face was very ugly. He clenched his fists tightly and said after a while, I know. Xiaoqing watched them leave. When she turned back to look at those people in capital city, there was only killing intent in her eyes. She and Dai had put in so much effort to save capital city. In the end, Dai was injured and was snatched away by someone. If anything happened to Dai, she would destroy the entire capital city. So what if she killed everyone? At most, they would be buried with Dai. Guessing that Gu Pan and the rest had already left the city, Xiaoqing said indifferently, Who took my lover away? Hand him over. The bureau chief was stunned and said, What happened? At this moment, the Li family members who were standing at the side stood out. What happened? Let me say it. The woman standing in front of you is not a hero at all. The man beside her is a zombie. I'm afraid this incident was caused by her. No matter how shocked everyone was, Xiaoqing just stared at the man from the Li family. Are you the one who kidnapped my lover? Hand him over. The bureau chief frowned and said to the man from the Li family, If you took her away, then bring her back. This must be a misunderstanding. Old Master Qin also said coldly, Li Yawu, we all know who's behind this. Don't throw dirty water on Xiaoqing. Hand him over first. The man from the Li family said, Qin, you're with her, aren't you? Otherwise, why would he protect her like this? He took a step forward, then turned around and said to everyone, Who doesn't have a family member who was eaten by zombies? Who didn't have friends? That was what zombies said. This woman, she harbored evil intentions. She actually raised a zombie. Maybe she killed a lot of people in secret to feed this zombie. Don't talk nonsense if you don't have evidence. Qin Zishi frowned and said coldly, Evidence? Li Yawu sneered and said, Then I'll show you the evidence, Director Qin. The director of the research institute stood out and said, Mr. Li did send a zombie to our institute today. It was at level 4 and looked like an ordinary human. Only after it was injured could we find that its skin had rotted. Dai was in the research institute. Xiaoqing, who came to this conclusion, calmed down a lot. However, she was more and more worried about whether Dai would be hurt. She looked at the people with superpowers and ordinary people. They were also saved by Dai and were one of the reasons why Dai was injured. However, these people all looked at Xiaoqing suspiciously and whispered in private. Gradually, voices began to come from the crowd. Chapter 411. Saving people? I don't think she has any good intentions. Maybe she was the one who created the green fog. Otherwise, why can't others cure it, but she can? Which good person would raise a zombie? I think there must be something wrong with her. Do you think she will really catch people alive and feed them to zombies? Xiaoqing was a little disappointed, but only a little. She didn't have any hope for the so-called human nature. Even if she absorbed the fog with the intention of strengthening herself, she still saved everyone. But the kindness of saving lives couldn't be compared to a few words of sowing discord. Xiaoqing was very calm. Are you done? Give me the person. Xiaoqing, why are you so arrogant? Do you think you are already invincible? Li Yawu said coldly. Let me tell you, if you can step out of the capital today, my name will be written upside down. If you dare to touch Xiaoqing today, my name will be written upside down. Old Master Qin also stepped forward and said expressionlessly. He believed that Xiaoqing was definitely not a bad person. No matter whether Dai was a zombie or not, at least one thing was certain, and that was that Dai and Xiaoqing were the saviors of the entire capital. No matter what, people couldn't forget their roots and couldn't be ungrateful. Even if he didn't know Xiaoqing before, He couldn't do something like turning around and attacking his benefactor. Moreover, he and Xiaoqing were friends despite the difference in age. Li Yaowu straightened his back in front of Old Master Qin for the first time. He raised his head and said, "Old Master Qin, at this point, you still want to protect her?" The bureau chief was the most embarrassed between the two. On one hand, he had a good impression of Xiaoqing. On the other hand, he couldn't allow zombies to appear in the capital. The bureau chief said with a headache, "How about this, Miss Xiao, you go back with us first. We will talk about it after we investigate this matter clearly." Xiaoqing just looked at Li Yaowu indifferently. "I'll say it one last time. Hand over the heir die or die. In this big capital, no one can stop me from killing you. As long as you say no, I will let your blood splatter in 5 steps. Do you believe me?" Xiaoqing tilted her head slightly, a cold smile on her lips. Seeing this, Li Yaowu suddenly felt somewhat flustered. For some reason, he did not dare to say those words of rejection, those tough words. She glanced at everyone and said, "I never thought that I saved anyone. I just wanted to do it, so I did it. So from the beginning, I never thought of asking for anything in return. Even now, I'm still saying the same thing. Hand over my lover, and I'll take him away. If you don't hand him over, it doesn't matter. At most, I'll turn the world upside down." Apart from the people she cared about, the life and death of everyone else always depended on her mood. Now these people wanted to hurt her heir die. Then they could not blame her for being ruthless. Li Yaowu was very flustered at first, but when he saw that the people around him were all high-level paranormals, he felt that he was too cowardly. So he braced himself and said, "Maybe you have some conspiracy. You want to leave just because you want to? What kind of place do you think Jingdu is?" Xiaoqing tore the space apart easily, then appeared in front of him and grabbed his neck. Suddenly, she stretched out her fingernails and inserted them into his flesh. As long as she used a little force, she could break Li Yao's neck bone. No one had expected Xiaoqing to suddenly make a move. They had thought that Xiaoqing was just joking. Even a level 5 paranormal couldn't kill Li Yaowu while he was under heavy protection, right? Then Xiaoqing easily grabbed Li Yaowu in her hand. She lifted Li Yaowu like a dead dog and said, "Take me to the heir die." Chapter 412. Li Yaowu's eyes rolled back. Seeing that he was about to die, Xiaoqing loosened her grip slightly. "Don't make me repeat myself." The bureau chief didn't want to go against Xiaoqing, so he waved his hand. "Take her there." President Chen widened his eyes and said, "No. This is the first time I've seen a zombie with such clear consciousness. If we can dissect him and figure out why he can retain his consciousness, we might be able to develop a drug to resist the zombie poison. He's willing to save the capital, so he must be willing to sacrifice himself for the people of the country." "Sacrifice my ass." Xiaoqing waved her hand and vines drilled out of the ground, surrounding President Chen in the middle. She said with a cold gaze, "Since you're so righteous and willing to sacrifice yourself for the country and the people, then sacrifice yourself for me first." With that, she controlled the vines to pierce President Chen's body, and injected a little bit of fog into his body. The fog spread quickly in the human body and soon reflected on the surface of his body. The specific reaction was that President Chen started to feel a little itchy on his neck. When he reached out to scratch it, rotten flesh fell off. He didn't know whether he was panicking or in despair. He desperately covered his neck and screamed, "No! No! No!" Xiaoqing said coldly, "Don't you need a zombie with consciousness? You're one now. Thank you for sacrificing yourself for the country and the people. I think that a patriotic person like you must be very willing to lie on the operating table in the laboratory." At this moment, those people looked at Xiaoqing as if they were looking at a demon. They couldn't help but retreat, afraid that they would become like President Chen. President Chen turned around in horror to pull them. "Save me! Save me!" However, no one dared to approach him. One retreated faster than the other. He was completely desperate and pounced on Xiaoqing with a roar. "You demon, I'm going to fight it out with you." Xiaoqing waved her hand gently and the man-eating flower drilled out. It opened its petals wide, and waited for President Chen to pounce on it. It swallowed President Chen, who was pouncing over. After swallowing it, it closed its petals and prepared to digest the delicacy. When it was halfway digested, it opened its petals and, like a human vomiting, spat out the half-melted President Chun. After vomiting, she would cover her head with a leaf. Sob, 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 it was so difficult. Some people in the crowd couldn't help but want to vomit. Vomiting was contagious. If one person vomited, others would vomit as well. Xiaoqing didn't care about their reactions. She just frowned and said, "Take me to see my lover. How many times do I need to say it? I don't mind killing 2 more people." Only then did one of the researchers lead Xiaoqing to the research institute. Xiaoqing carried Li Yaowu and followed behind. When she passed by Old Master Qin, she said indifferently, "Old Master Qin, no matter what happens later, please don't interfere. Even if I die, it's fine, okay?" Old Master Qin understood what Xiaoqing meant. She didn't want to implicate the Qin family. Today, there would definitely be a bloody battle between her and the Li family. If the Qin family interfered, it was very likely that the Qin family would become the target of public criticism. Of course, there was one thing that Old Master Qin didn't know. Xiaoqing was already prepared to go all out. Today she, the Li family, and those who dared to stop her would fight to the death. If the members of the Qin family were present, she would have to worry about accidentally injuring them, which would distract her. As long as the members of the Qin family weren't present, anyone who tried to stop her was her enemy. So what if she killed them all? Chapter 413. The Research Institute was built in the middle of the capital. Due to its importance, the security was very tight. However, due to the fog a few days ago, many people had left, so the security here seemed to be much more lax. Xiaoqing followed behind the researcher and walked all the way to a laboratory. Just as she reached the door, she saw Fu Jingma holding a knife and trying to stab Dai on the operating table. Xiaoqing couldn't care less about Li Yaowu in her hands. She casually broke his neck and threw Li Yaowu away. Then she quickly rushed forward and kicked Fu Jingma away. Dai's face was pale as he lay on the operating table. He still looked like he was on his last breath. Xiaoqing violently tore apart the things that bound Dai's hands and feet. She picked up Dai and touched Dai's face with heartache. An old man from the crowd rushed forward and hugged Li Yaowu's corpse. "Son, he should be the head of the Li family from the previous generation. His status was similar to Old Master Qin's in the Qin family. Xiaoqing, the Li family and you are irreconcilable." Xiaoqing sneered and looked at him. "Long ago, when you made a move on Dai, I was already irreconcilable with you. What's the point of saying such nonsense?" As she walked past, she stepped on Fu Jingma's neck. Right now, she didn't care whether he was Dai's brother or not. She only knew that Fu Jingma wanted Dai to die. Then let him die. Fu Jingma couldn't take it lying down. He actually wanted to ask, "Why won't you look at me? I clearly have the same appearance as him. I can be gentler and more docile than him. I love you more than him. Why won't you like me?" The moment his neck was broken, Fu Jingma was reminded of many years ago. He was standing downstairs and Fu Jingshan's Dai was standing on the second floor. He was high and mighty and his eyes were filled with disgust. At that moment, Fu Jingma had a dark thought. He wanted to take everything away from Fu Jingshan. They were both that man's children. Why was it that he could only be an illegitimate child, while Fu Jingshan could have everything? A year later, he pushed Fu Jingshan down from the 3rd floor. Unfortunately, Fu Jingshan didn't die. His head was injured, and he couldn't remember who pushed him down. That was the first time Fu Jingma had thought of killing someone. He wanted to kill Fu Jingshan. From then on, Fu Jingma understood his own heart more and more, but from then on he never had a good chance to make a move on Fu Jingma. When the apocalypse came, Fu Jingma pushed Fu Jingshan for the 2nd time. This time, he pushed Fu Jingshan into a group of zombies. At that time, Fu Jingma felt that no matter how lucky Fu Jingshan was, he could only be eaten by the zombies. Unfortunately, Fu Jingshan didn't know how many good deeds he had done in his previous life to save his luck. He didn't die and only became a zombie. Fu Jingma felt that God was too unfair. He gave everything to Fu Jingshan, but he had nothing. Even if Fu Jingxian became a zombie in the end, he could still easily get Xiaoqing's love. No matter how hard he tried, he couldn't get what he wanted. This must be God playing a joke on him. After Xiaoqing casually killed Fu Jingma, she walked towards the group of people behind her. She walked out leisurely, not worried about being stopped at all. She wasn't afraid at all. She walked leisurely as if she was taking a stroll. Old Master Li had just sent off his son. This was the most painful moment. He hugged his dead son and said with a heart-wrenching voice, "Today, if you can take one step out of the capital, then there is only one possibility. The Li family is all dead." Chapter 4:14. Xiaoqing held Dai in her arms and felt much better. She looked at Master Li with a smile and said gently, "I'll satisfy your wish." She hadn't killed anyone for a long time. Today, the Qin family completely pissed her off and touched her bottom line. Xiaoqing even thought that she had gone crazy for a moment. If she hadn't found Dai, or something had happened to Dai, she would have killed everyone in the capital city. Luckily, Dai was fine, but she wasn't going to let the Li family go. Under Xiaoqing's repeated orders, the Qin family had already retreated. Even the leader's men were dragged away by Master Qin. Then, only those who wanted to go against her were left. All those who stood in her way were people who wanted to hurt her family's dummy. Then they should all die. After the breakthrough, it was the first time that Xiaoqing used her full strength. She carried Dai on her back, and tied Dai tightly to her body with vines to free her hands. Then, she walked towards the Li family and those who stood in her way. Actually, killing people wasn't pleasant at all. Xiaoqing thought so. And then vines stretched out everywhere. Anyone who wanted to get close to her, and Dai would be crushed by the vines before they could get close. Xiaoqing didn't even need to move her hands. She only needed to use the vines. Xiaoqing walked all the way from the research institute to the outside. She couldn't remember how many people she had killed. She only remembered that she left a long bloody road wherever she walked. The ground under her feet was sticky. Even when she walked outside, she still left bloody footprints. There were still people who didn't fear death and rushed towards her. Xiaoqing took their lives without blinking. In the beginning, the Li family did it by themselves. Later, they began to incite others to do it. Xiaoqing didn't care if the person who attacked her was from the Li family or another family. Anyway, anyone who attacked her was an enemy. After she walked for a while, the Li family couldn't take the loss anymore. They had no choice but to use their trump card, a team of a few hundred superpowered people. In the team, none of the ability users were below level 3. This was the last trump card of the Li family. Even when they were fighting with the Qin family, even when they were being trampled under the feet of the Qin family, the Li family had never used this trump card. But now, Old Master Li had gone crazy. He didn't know if it was because he had committed too many sins, but God couldn't see through it. Old Master Li had an affair with many women, but in the end he only gave birth to Li Yawu. Li Yawu had countless wives and mistresses. He was almost 40 years old, but he still hadn't given birth to a son. In other words, Xiaoqing had cut off the roots of the Li family with a gentle pinch. The Li family would have no descendants from then on. Anyway, Old Master Li was 70 years old. He probably couldn't make the iron tree bloom again. It was no wonder that Old Master Li wanted to fight Xiaoqing to the death. But what was the use of risking his life? There was an answer. No matter how powerful Xiaoqing was, it couldn't change the fact that she was only one person. She could kill an old master with her fists. Ants could kill an elephant if there were many of them. Besides, Xiaoqing wasn't an elephant, and the group of people around her wasn't as simple as ants. The most important thing was that Xiaoqing had to protect Dai. When Dai was on her, she couldn't tear the space and leave directly. Otherwise, it was very likely that she would hurt Dai. Therefore, when Xiaoqing walked out step by step, the resistance she encountered was so great that even with her strength, she began to get hurt. As soon as Xiaoqing got hurt, someone began to exclaim, "She's not human either." Chapter 4:15. Without blood, once injured, they would recover quickly. This was the characteristic of zombies. At this moment, everyone looked at Xiaoqing in a different way. She was a powerful zombie who could talk and think. She looked like a human being. If she had bad intentions when she sneaked into the capital, she could have infected most of the people in the capital and turned them into zombies. It would have been easy for her to assassinate the leader. Xiaoqing didn't care about the injuries on her body. She commanded the vines to cooperate with the space cracks and kept reaping the lives of the people. Maybe there were innocent people who were controlled by the Li family, but so what? Xiaoqing didn't have time to distinguish who was good and who was bad. They could only say that they were unlucky to meet Xiaoqing. That was all. Mr. Li was so angry that he vomited blood. He watched Xiaoqing break through the encirclement little by little. The first thing he did was to send people to close the gate of the capital. Xiaoqing couldn't get out. She could only die of exhaustion in the city. No matter how strong a person was, no matter how strong a zombie was, there would be a time when they would be exhausted. He didn't mind sacrificing people's lives. Even if he had to sacrifice people's lives, he had to keep Xiaoqing. The Li family was finished the moment Li Yaowu died. Then Xiaoqing would be buried with the Li family and his son. When she was not far from the gate, Xiaoqing was already scarred. She carried the air dye and looked at the closed gate not far away. She had a headache. At this time, Xiaoqing suddenly heard some unusual sounds. It seemed that many people were approaching the capital. There were also some people who didn't move in. They were crying and screaming in panic. Many people were banging on the city gate, trying to get it to open. Mr. Li's face changed. He quickly ordered people to go and see what was going on. Someone went up the wall and looked outside. He was so scared that he almost fell down. He rolled and crawled over, then said, No, zombies are surrounding the city. Why would zombies suddenly surround the city at this time? There were no signs at all. With the addition of Xiaoqing, no matter how stupid Old Man Li was, he knew that the zombie siege had something to do with Xiaoqing. He gritted his teeth and said, This must be Xiaoqing's scheme. We must not open the city gates. But there are still thousands of people outside. The zombies are surrounding the city. If we don't let them in, they will all die. Someone whispered. A cold glint flashed across Old Master Li's eyes. He said firmly, No matter what, we can't open the city gates. He must kill Xiaoqing today. No matter what, he had to kill Xiaoqing. At this time, many people rushed over from the city. The leaders were none other than Zhu Machun and Qin Zishi. They said expressionlessly, Open the city gates. Let the people outside in. Old Master Li led his men to block Xiaoqing and the others. He said coldly, Who dares to open the city gate? Although he was very resolute, the people under him were already wavering. They all whispered, Don't worry. There are tens of thousands of our own people outside the city. It's too cruel to leave them outside. Open the city gates. My brother is still outside. That's right, my second aunt is also outside. We can't just watch them die. In any case, we can't keep Xiaoqing here. Old Master Li was so angry that he spat out a mouthful of blood. He protected the city gates, his eyes bloodshot. He roared, Who dares to open the city gates? Xiaoqing looked at him. After a while she said, So a person's selfishness is this scary. A person like you can't even compare to a demon like me, so you can also go die. As soon as she finished speaking, Old Master Li suddenly twitched. Then he knelt on the ground. Many green sprouts drilled out of his 7 orifices. He didn't know when, but Xiaoqing had planted daughter in his body. After Old Master Li died, no one stopped Qin Zishi and the others from opening the gates. The heavy city gates slowly opened. Xiaoqing raised her head and saw many familiar people standing among the zombies. The one at the front was actually Yi. Compared to the humans who were pointing their swords at them, the zombies were actually so cute. Chapter 416. Xiaoqing carried air dye on her back and walked out slowly. When she left the city gate, she looked back at the others. Everyone was looking at her with concern. There was no fear or disgust towards zombies in their eyes. They still treated her as a friend. This made Xiaoqing feel much better. She waved her hand and walked towards Yi. Yan Hanqing and the others were standing beside Yi. When they saw Xiaoqing coming over, they couldn't help but go forward to greet her. I'm fine. Xiaoqing's voice was a little hoarse. She said in a low voice, thank you. Yingyi was expressionless, but there was a trace of a smile in his eyes. We're all friends. You don't have to thank me. You can't stay here. Why don't you go to Jiang City? Xiaoqing nodded and said, let's go. She knew that once the fact that she was a zombie was exposed, it meant that she would be far away from human cities. Even if her friends didn't care, the ordinary people would be afraid and resist. Therefore, she might not step into the capital for the rest of her life. Xiaoqing couldn't help but apologize to Gu Panpan and the others. I'm sorry. She hesitated and said, no matter if it's the small bases in the south or the north, there are definitely many people who don't know about your identities. You have a lot of crystal nuclei in my hands. Let's divide them and find a small base to settle down. It didn't matter to her and Dai. Dai was a zombie, so was Little Bun. As for Yan Chiyue, he probably wouldn't want to be separated from her even if he was beaten to death. But what about Gu Panpan and the others? They were all normal humans. If they went to Jiang City, they would be surrounded by zombies. Who would be able to stand it? Even if they knew that the zombies wouldn't do anything to them, they would still be worried. They were afraid that they would wake up one day and be surrounded by zombies. Even if Xiaoqing didn't want to leave, she had to admit that Gu Panpan and the others were no longer suitable for her to be with them. After the apocalypse, except for the first few days, she had almost always been with Gu Panpan and the others. Now that they were suddenly separated, Xiaoqing was full of reluctance. Gu Panpan widened her eyes and said angrily, Sister Qing, what do you mean? You don't want us anymore. Xiaoqing patted her head and said, that's not what I meant. I just feel that this is more suitable for you. And little Tong, I hope you can take her away and take good care of her. I'm not leaving. Gu Panpan's eyes were a little red. I'll follow you wherever you go. Sister Qing, please don't chase me away. Xiaotong didn't know how to speak. She just clutched the corner of Xiaoqing's clothes tightly. Her eyes were full of fear. She was afraid that she would be abandoned by Xiaoqing. Even when she was beaten to death by her father, she was not so afraid. Yan Hanqing didn't say a word. He just stood behind her silently. Xiaoqing had a headache. She looked at the others and then looked at the others. Finally, she compromised. If you don't like living here, just tell me. It's the same if you move out. Gu Panpan nodded quickly. But in her heart, she was afraid that she would never tell Xiaoqing to leave. She was still looking forward to Gu Chuan marrying Xiaoqing. A group of people and zombies walked back. After walking for a short distance, they stopped to take a rest. Yan Chiyue's face was still very pale, but he was much better. He rested his head on Xiaoqing's thigh and whispered to Xiaoqing to discuss. I've studied it for a long time. Finally, I found that there is probably something that can restrain the special energy in Dai's wound. Yan Chiyue said, this kind of energy is cold. I think we can go to the crater to have a look. The plants growing near it should have enough heat to restrain this kind of energy. Chapter 417. There was nothing invincible in the world. No matter how powerful something was, it would have its nemesis. They just hadn't found it yet. Xiaoqing gritted her teeth and said, can Dai maintain his current condition? Yan Chiyue continued, no problem. With me around, his life won't be in danger for the time being. It should be enough for us to find a solution. Xiaoqing calculated and then said, there are no volcanoes in our country. That is to say, if we want to find volcanoes, we can either go to the sea to find volcanoes or go to the island. Isn't there a Mount Futu there? It's quite a famous volcano. Yan Chiyue rested his head on her soft thighs and suggested, let Hanqing and the rest settle down. After that, we will set off and head south. We will definitely find it. If we can't find it, we can go to Japan. Xiaoqing nodded and said, you don't have to go this time. Stay at home and help me take care of my son. Xiaoqing was actually selfish. Yan Chiyue and Little Bun had always been on bad terms. Xiaoqing hoped that Yan Chiyue could improve their relationship. After all, She was sure that she liked Yin Chiyue and Yin Chiyue liked her too. They would definitely be together in the future. If Yin Chiyue and Little Bun didn't get along well, she would have a headache being stuck in the middle. Yin Chiyue refused without hesitation. No, I have to go with you this time no matter what. Firstly, Dai's condition is uncertain. If I don't go with you, what will you do if his condition suddenly worsens? Secondly, do you know what kind of plant can restrain the evil energy in his wound? Don't tell me you can bring some back. I will go with you. We can try a few more times and study it. Maybe we can solve it on the spot, and everyone will be happy. Xiaoqing stroked his short hair helplessly and said softly, "But you are injured too." "My injury isn't serious. I can recuperate as we go. You know that my body recovers very quickly." Yin Chiyue hugged Xiaoqing's thighs tightly and whined. "All right." Xiaoqing patted Yin Chiyue's head and said, "We shouldn't delay this matter any further. When we reach Jiang City and settle everyone down, we'll leave." Yin Chiyue also nodded. She was quite happy in her heart. Although there was an extra Dai, and it was not a honeymoon, the three of them went out and there was no one around. There were no men who were eyeing Xiaoqing covetously. It was quite nice to have a threesome. It was very suitable for nurturing feelings. Jiang City was in the south. The further south they went, the more humid and warm the weather was. Xiaoqing liked this kind of weather. Jiang City was near the longest river in the country. It was surrounded by mountains and water. The environment was very good. This was originally a big city in the country. After the apocalypse, it was occupied by zombies, so no one dared to approach it. Yin Yi and his friends occupied the mountain and lived a comfortable life. Once they reached Jiang City, Yin Yi waved his hand and said generously, "You can choose any house in the whole city. You can live wherever you want." This kind of generosity was full of the taste of a fish pond owner. Xiaoqing's mouth twitched. In the end, she chose a villa. It was near Yin Ye's residence. Yin Yi and his friends lived next door. The surrounding area was fenced. With Yin Ye's order, no zombies would come near. Xiaoqing specially discussed with Yin Yi about this. After all, she would not be around for a long time. Therefore, she was particularly worried about her friends. What if some zombies accidentally hurt them? Yin Yi solved this problem quickly. He left the scent of a zombie king on Yin Hanqing and the others. In this way, no bold zombies would dare to attack Yin Hanqing and the others. You're tuning into the Earbook Haven YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.